In the short term, I strongly support and China needs a stimulus which includes investment, but also includes an important component of consumption in that situation. But over the period to 2035, the strategic thing is going to be this combination of research and development, technological upgrading, and investment. So those are the key roles which China's going to play for itself. But sometimes people forget that they think that innovation can be a good idea, because the innovation has got to be embodied in new productive processes, new machineries, new systems of organization, new logistics. This takes massive capital investment. Here, China already has a decisive advantage over the US.
In 2023, I think for most countries, how to reverse the economic deceleration and how to launch their stimulus measures will be the biggest challenge. Therefore, in your opinion, what kind of role can China play in such a crucial process?
Well, I think there's two things here that you've got to look at. You've got to look at the short term and the longer term. Let's look at China's economy as it goes into 2023. China's economy slowed down compared to its previous period. We know that China's economy before the pandemic was growing around 6% a year. And during the pandemic, its economy grew by 4.3% a year. So China's economy has been growing slightly under trend. That's why there has been some stimulus measures which can be taken. But then let's look at what is the exact form of the stimulus measures that's got to be taken. As I said, in the United States, you had this huge inflationary wave because the United States didn't invest at all. Capital depreciation in the United States during the pandemic was bigger than capital investment. The US came out of the pandemic with a lower capital stock, but it had a huge demand stimulus, and this created big inflation. China's quite different. China's come out, retail sales are, over the 3 years, a whole, are up, but they're up less than their investment. So China's economy went through the pandemic with its investment being somewhat stronger than its retail sales or its consumer side. Therefore, in the short term, it is highly desirable, both politically and economically, for China to launch a short-term measures, of which an important part will be consumption, because the service sector was depressed by the fact that people didn't want to go out particularly when there was the outbreaks of first the lockdowns, then the outbreaks of COVID, and therefore the consumer side was somewhat depressed, and that needs to therefore be stimulated. And there are well-known ways of doing this. You can have subsidies, you can have big advertising campaigns, you can have short time limited consumer offers, etc. These are relatively well known. I've had some experience of these in London myself when we were hit by the Iraq War. And China's regions are doing that, and they have a good short-term effect. Secondly, it's advantageous because consumer industries in general don't need as much capital investment as capital goods industries. Therefore, you can have a rather quick recovery. So in the short term, China's having a stimulus program which is going to be include an important element of consumption, not only consumption. Over the long term, however, the situation is somewhat different. Let's take that to 2035, because that's the next key goal that China's looked at. China's goal in that, as was set out, is to double GDP or double GDP per capita, that China will achieve the level of a average developed economy by 2035. Can leave aside inflation. China's economy would be somewhat large, somewhat per capita, somewhat higher than, say, Poland or Hungary, a little bit lower than Greece. But what are the preconditions for doing this? Well, there's going to be no population growth at all. And it means that China's productive capacity will have to double between 2020 and 2035, which is very doable. It means 4.6% a year growth from 2023. This can be done. But now in that, consumption and investment play totally different roles. What will be the contribution of consumption to this doubling of capacity? Well, the answer is zero, because by definition, consumption is not an input into production. I sometimes see confused things in the Chinese, some sections of the Chinese media about. That's why the long-term measures are somewhat different to the short-term ones. But if we look at this investment, what type of investment is it going to be? Well, it's going to have to go into increasingly high value-added production. And here, China has the preconditions to do this. If we take the last decade, China's research and development, which is the key really to increasing productivity and high value, has been growing at about 11% a year, and the US has been growing at 4% a year. That means China's R&D expenditure has been growing almost 3 times as fast as the United States. By 2020, which is the last internationally comparable figures which were published by the OECD, China's R&D expenditure in total terms, not as a percentage of the economy, but its total terms, was 85% of the US. And with that rate of growth, if you take that forward, that means China's R&D is in 2023 is probably the same as the United States. By 2030, if you have those growth rates, China's R&D will be significantly higher than the United States, around 40% higher than the United States. So therefore, this means, the technological level of China's companies is going to go up greatly. Secondly, however, China's got a decisive advantage over the United States. We know that innovation sustained by research and development is the key to upgrading, right? Okay. But sometimes people forget that they think that innovation can be a good idea. If you've got a good idea, then an innovative idea, therefore the economy will grow. Well, it's not true, because the innovation has got to be embodied in new productive processes, new machineries, new systems of organization, new logistics. This takes massive capital investment. This is, for example, the secret for the most successful US high technology firms. You say Google or somebody like that, or Intel. Is the combination of innovative development, that is big expenditure of R&D, and secondly, the capital investment, which can be used in order to turn this into machinery. If you just have an idea and you don't embody it in a new productive process, the economy is not going to grow. Here, China already has a decisive advantage over the US. If you take capital creation, that is total savings by companies, household, etc., it's about, on the latest data, about $6.6 trillion in China and $3.8 trillion in the United States. That is, China's advantage is already 70% higher than the United States. This means China has got an unparalleled ability to take this research and development and this innovation and turn it into new productive processes, new equipment, etc. This is why you're beginning to see China overtaking the United States in certain high technology fields. Not all, I don't want to exaggerate. Overall, China has not yet caught up totally with the US in high technology development, but you're beginning to see a situation whereby China is ahead. Huawei is the most advanced telecommunications company in the world. That's why the United States tries to ban it, because it can't compete with it. I thought it was very well put by the CEO of Huawei. He said, it's ridiculous when the United States says that we're stealing intellectual property from them. We produce things that they don't produce. How can we steal property from them? The worry is that the United States might be stealing intellectual property from us. If you take the solar power industry, which is the new development of the whole energy complex, here, even the United States admits China is totally dominant in this, far ahead of the United States in solar power, wind power, etc. This is not merely individual company where China is ahead. This is a whole economic sector. And we know what's going to happen during the next decades. The existing fossil fuels industries are going to be gradually replaced, because otherwise we're going to have a climate disaster, and the world is pledging not to do that. And it's going to go into renewable energy, and China has a decisive advantage in this already. It's also beginning to spill over into consumer sector. I don't know how people follow the discussions in the West about TikTok, but I mean, TikTok has now become the most visited website in the world. It's overtaken Facebook, it's overtaken Google. And this is a new thing because this is a consumer facing sector. So therefore, the key to the strategic development of China to 2035 is this combination of big expenditure on research and development, creating innovation, and the financial capital in order to turn this into new productive processes. So the situation is slightly different in the short term. In the short term, I strongly support, and China needs a stimulus which includes investment, but also includes an important component of consumption in that situation. But over the period to 2035, the strategic thing is going to be this combination of research and development, technological upgrading, and investment. So those are the key roles which China's going to play for itself. Then if I can just add a little bit onto that, how that interacts with the rest of the world economy. The global south, that is the developing countries, are going to continue to grow more rapidly than the developing economies. Again, if you take the IMF predictions, between 2021 and 2027, output in GDP in the developed countries is going to grow by about $14 trillion. But in the developing countries, it's going to grow by $22 trillion. China by 2035 is going to find itself in a different situation compared to the global south than it is today. Already China is technologically ahead of most global south countries, but by 2035 it's going to be very much more ahead. And you can have the situation which is sometimes referred to in Asia as flying geese situation. That is, one economy grows more technologically advanced than the others follows. China is in a key position to be the leading country from the point of view of technology and development, from the point of view of the whole of the global south. And this is very important because strategically, other global south countries are not going to be content just to be suppliers of commodities to China. I mean, it's very good that Brazil supports soybeans, exports soybeans to China, etc. But Brazil wants to develop its own industry as well. And China's therefore going to be an advanced economy with which the global south countries will interact, because what will happen is some of the lower value added industries which China is dominant in the past or today, China won't be so competitive in by when we get to 2035, because very gratefully Chinese wages will be very much higher, and therefore China won't be competitive in industries in which rely upon low wages. It's already not. So therefore, if you look at the stimulus programs, as I say, it's important to distinguish between the short-term type of stimulus program and the whole strategic development, which takes place up to 2035.